Andy is an old, ugly, lonely man who cannot be killed by meteorites, swords, or even truckmen. On the other hand, there's Fuko, a girl with big footballs who can kill anyone by touching them. What's going to happen when they both meet? Let's find out. The story begins with two different scenes. In one, there's a post-apocalyptic world where a couple separates, and in the other, a little girl waves goodbye to a plane taking off. In this scene, the couple is around outside in the snow. They do the hugging, kissing, and after analyzing the situation, they both died. What they are doing on the ice outside. In the other scene, the little girl sees that it begins to snow, but is then mortified when the plane catches fire and explodes. Then, we meet Fuko with her two huge footballs and book, who just finished reading One Piece and wishes her life could be like the story. She's relieved that she's done with the manga and thinks about ending her life. Just like another One Piece fan who is ready to die once the One Piece story ends. But who the care about One Piece? Suddenly, a muscular guy warns her about the danger of standing there with those huge footballs. She tells him to off and explains that she wanted passionate romance, but due to her body issues, that'll never happen. This is why she has chosen to die. She threatens him, claiming that her touch can transmit a deadly disease, but the half-naked bodybuilder doesn't take her seriously. The emotional pain she feels causes her to close her eyes, but the guy with the silver plate in his head just walks right into the knife she was using to threaten him. She's utterly confused about the situation. She starts to question if she has actually stabbed him, all while the man firmly grabs her head. Interestingly, he reveals that he's never come across a deadly disease transmitted through touch, but he finds the idea intriguing and exciting. The man with a blade in his chest points out that things have been getting pretty stale, and he excitedly waits to feel the poison. He mentions that he made physical contact with her and eagerly wonders whether the poison will cause him pain, but she tells him her unluck is coming. He's shocked as the ground shatters, and he's hugged by a speeding train. Fuko is overwhelmed with guilt as she apologizes to the stranger for involving him in her situation. The man seems overly thrilled for someone who just lost his body and comprehends that the disease excuse Fuko mentioned was to safeguard others. Incredibly, Fuko watches as the man uses his blood to propel his head and rebuild his body. The guy considers himself fortunate to have met someone like Fuko, but she is too shocked to pay attention to him. In her panic, she calls him a zombie and give a nut-breaking punch and kills his future babies in the process. Also, he might need nut surgery. After that, Fuko quickly flees. This guy is agile, swiftly using his abilities to propel his entire body and capture her, and explains that he is undead. They escape as the police approach. He instructs her to hold on, but Andy is naked. What can she hold? You know what she gonna hold on. Andy accelerates like a jet. He shows his regeneration ability, but she ignores him and tries to get away. He just captures her again. She warns him about triggering her unluck if he touches her. The man, however, remains cautious and correctly notes that he should be safe as long as he only touches her clothing, and also, he points out that he wants to know more about her unluck. Fuko initially panics but soon realizes that she had planned on ending her life that same day. She claims that the threats from the man won't scare her, so he comes up with the idea to spin her around at extreme speeds. Struggling to endure the torment, Fuko eventually agrees to tell him everything. She starts her explanation. 10 years ago, when she was just 8 years old and flat, her parents were going overseas on a business trip, and she was seeing them off. They hugged her a lot before leaving, but their plane experienced unexpected engine trouble, resulting in the death of all 270 people on board, including her parents. It was then that she learned that people who touch her suffer various degrees of harm. This revelation led her to believe she caused her parents' accident, and she now covers her body from head to toe to prevent anyone from touching her. As she opens up about this deeply personal experience, the man rudely interrupts and touches her boobs. She wonders if he even listened, but he indeed did. What he understood was that touching her brings bad luck, and he decides to test it. She warns him to run while he still can, but it's too late, and a falling crate turns him into a flat pancake. Fuko takes this opportunity to escape, but he quickly regenerates, unsatisfied with the results. However, she slips on a banana peel and falls from the building as he snacks on a banana. In a state of disbelief about the absurdity of dying due to a banana peel, Fuko remarks that she never even had the opportunity to experience anything in life. As she descends, her beloved manga slips from her pocket, and she desperately pleads for her life not to come to an end in this way. She crumbles, finally comprehending that she isn't prepared for this. Just then, the man arrives to rescue her, using his unusual ability to slow their fall. He's determined to prevent her death because he believes that he's found the power that will give him a real death. He reveals that he knows she tried to hide a certain rule from him earlier, and he aims to discover it to trigger an even greater stroke of unluck. His goal is to bring out the greatest stroke of unluck she holds within, in the hope of finally ending his ridiculously long life. He employs his somewhat repulsive power to fly once more and proclaims that it's time to return to his hideout and study her unluck ability. However, in the distance, it becomes apparent that he is being observed. The individual in the black suit clarifies to someone that the human blood dispenser is on the way to his hideout with what they refer to as the new breed. He is directed to capture her once they know about her ability. Back at his hideout, the man learns that the duration of contact with Fuko corresponds to the magnitude of her unluck. He wants to test the surface area next, so he asks her to remove her clothes for maximum contact.
Sensational.
However, she refuses and runs away. She demands him to give up on his experiments, but he blames her for not revealing how her bad luck works. Unfortunately, she gets caught on a nail and loses her hat. The man comments on her long hair, and she's amazed that someone has witnessed her incredibly long hair and clarifies that nobody can trim it for her because any hairdresser who tries would simply meet their demise. The man, resourceful as ever, brings out scissors from his and starts cutting her hair, explaining that as long as he's touching her, no bad luck will come his way. So, he'll go ahead and provide her with a new haircut in meantime. This is true. She points out that when he releases her, all the accumulated unluck will strike him all at once. She worries about the consequences once he lets go, but he confidently declares that he is undead. Surprisingly, he used to be a stylist, and he quickly finishes the haircut. She hesitates, but eventually looks and is relieved to see that he has released her without suffering any bad luck. Fuko thanks him. Undead, more excited than ever, mentions that he held on to her for 15 minutes straight and expects that the next unluck should be a whopper. Fuko has no idea what will happen, but suddenly, the man's head is removed. It turns out to be the individual in the suit from earlier. They thank Fuko for catching Undead off guard before he explains who they are. He states that they will have to contain Undead in a special capsule first. Fuko is shocked when she's handcuffed and realizes they are not on her side, but they laugh at her for being so naive. They explain her that their job is to monitor and control unselected negators, like herself, who could disrupt the world. She has no clue what they are talking about, and the guys goes on to explain that her ability nullifies the luck of anyone who touches her, causing their demise, a skill suited for murder. However, touching her through clothing is safe. The weakness of her ability is that once its conditions are known, it can be countered with gloves. They express their intention to utilize her power for killing, and he is sure that Undead wanted to use it for the same. But Fuko defends Undead, claiming that he only used her unluck on himself to ensure his own death. She states that her new zombie friend is nothing like them and tries to defend him, but the bad guy threatens her. Fuko breaks down in tears, feeling responsible for Undead's situation because he cut her hair, even though she's grateful for it. She thanks Undead, and at that moment, the guy holding him is struck by lightning. The other person considers whether her unluck caused it but concludes that it doesn't match the requirements. They assume it was a stroke of his own unluck, but Fuko corrects them, insisting it was no fluke. Just then, Fuko is thrilled to see that Undead has returned, and the human blood-dripping machine is furious. The one-eye ugly-looking boss informs his gang that guns are ineffective against Undead, and they must attack him simultaneously. According to them, Undead seems like an amateur fighter. Undead explains that he may appear inexperienced in combat now, but he has a wealth of fighting knowledge due to his long life. Usually, he keeps a lid on his brain to store a century's worth of memories because he would lose his mind otherwise. With the lid removed, he regains his combat skills and defeats the enemies effortlessly. Undead realizes that his decapitation wasn't due to Fuko's unluck. The unluck of the haircut was the unexpected lightning bolt. He decides to test for a time delay in her ability. The one-eye guy recognizes that Undead is more complex than they initially thought. Since Undead's skills developed over a long life, they don't have a chance. They threaten to kill Fuko unless he hands over his head without regenerating. Fuko thinks it's pointless, but the one-eye guy suggests that Undead values her. Undead is disappointed that the ugly-looking bad guy won't fight because he is a and he starts removing his own head. Fuko begins a dramatic speech about preventing others from getting hurt, but Undead isn't listening and has already chopped off his head. Undead makes it clear that he isn't concerned about her feelings. He had a great time all day and suggested that they should party together again if they happen to meet in the future. Undead hands over his head, causing his body to disintegrate as his head goes flying. Meanwhile, Fuko starts thinking about how she does know how to trigger the most significant stroke of unluck. She manages to free herself from ugly one-eye guy, but is uncertain about the success of her plan. Fuko leaps into the air to give Undead's head a kiss on the cheek, leaving the guy puzzled about her actions. She nonchalantly explained that she thought it would be nice to put aside worries and make contact with someone. She senses her unluck is coming, leaving the suited person baffled, but Undead seems to understand. Undead tells Fuko to get away as he regenerates, and informs the ugly guy that he's finished. He clarifies that the moment he crossed paths with them, his luck ran out. Outside, a meteorite appears in the sky, lighting up the area. Undead holds the guy and looks at the meteorite, which completely destroys the entire building. Afterward, Fuko worries about the undead, but he emerges from the smoke unharmed. His cheerful demeanor remains unchanged as he mentions that he has never been hit by a meteorite before. She's relieved to see him alive, and he compliments her on her good luck. Finally, they introduce themselves, and Undead doesn't have a real name. Fuko decides to give him the name Andy because he's undead, but he doesn't really care and is more amazed that a simple kiss caused such destruction. Now he wants to f her. As soon as she hears she starts running. Fuko reflects on how her unluck always results in people getting killed. This made her feel like she didn't deserve to live. However, her encounter with Undead, who found her amusing, initially made her hate him. Still, being with him gave her a reason to keep living a bit longer. Her excitement was short-lived when she realized that she is caught by a vulgar horny Andy, who can give him pleasure for hours without resting. He's obsessed with drawing out the most significant stroke of unluck by putting inside her.
What did he say?
I mean putting her feelings inside her heart in the form of love, which leads him to suggest that increasing their intimacy could bring about unlimited destructive possibilities. Andy is in a hurry, but Fuko is angry and wants Andy to stop. She believes Andy sees her as a mere tool for dying, a tool with two massive footballs, and she tries to find an escape plan. Fuko believes they have to like each other first. Fuko explains to Andy that, in addition to her mom, dad, and him, she has also kissed her granddad, only kissed nothing much, who had these dentures that scared the crap out of her. The only thing that happened to him from her kiss was sprained dick. I mean ankles. He passed away 3 years later, but there was too much of a time lag for it to be her unluck's fault. Fuko concludes that the more she likes a person, the more significant the unlucky event becomes. She warns Andy that if he keeps trying to enter her tunnel, she will eventually come to hate him, resulting in a terrible stroke of unluck, ruining his chances of a proper end to his life, and ruining her chance of a proper BDSM. Andy instantly grasps the situation. He states that his new goal is to ensure Fuko doesn't die until the moment of her greatest stroke of unluck. She's curious about his statement, but he's already on the move. They need to run because they are pursued by an organization known as the Negators, and their work is to capture unidentified mysteries like them. Andy takes Fuko to a well-equipped armory with enough weapons to annihilate any zombie apocalypse. He explains that he has set up such locations worldwide to battle others like them. The organization that's pursuing them is aware of their abilities and sees them as a threat. She doesn't know who those guys are, but there's no time for questions. She's now equipped with bulletproof and stab-proof gear, even resistant to chemical weapons. He clarifies that it's a precaution against the organization that attacks them, an entity that monitors unidentified mysteries like themselves. According to him, they have to be vigilant against their own kind, and it's highly likely that another group of these beings will arrive soon. Fuko thinks that their meteorite stunt may have scared them off, but Andy believes that's unlikely. The organization, known as the Negators, possesses considerable firepower and includes individuals who can negate the rules of the world. The organization had a front-row view of their unluck and undead abilities, but the capabilities of the organization members remain a mystery. They don't stand a chance, so Andy has decided that they need to run. He reveals that 50 years ago, those Negators caught him and messed him up pretty badly. He spent the following 10 years in a laboratory, enduring constant experimentation on his body. Andy is curious about what the organization would do to Fuko if they were to capture her. It's frightening to think about how many lives could be sacrificed just to solve the mysteries of her unluck. Andy, with his vivid imagination, suggests that they might go to extreme lengths like cutting off parts of Fuko's body to test if her unluck still affects detached body parts. Horrified by the thought, Fuko immediately agrees that they should run to avoid such a gruesome fate. They speed away on their charming motorcycle, and Andy shows that he can get excited regardless of the situation. They don't have a clear destination, and Andy's plan is to keep running. Fuko fears that her lack of a plan will lead to their capture, but Andy reassures her that he won't let her die until she falls madly in love with him, triggering the greatest stroke of unluck. Fuko is surprised that he's still hopeful about her developing plot with her, feelings. But Andy, the confident protagonist, assures her that it will indeed happen, and when it's gonna happen he's gonna do her passionately, because Fuko is such a pushover. Suddenly, the sky tears apart, revealing a warp. The same guys who captured Andy 50 years ago suddenly appear from one of those sky portals. Something enormous emerges from it, and Andy immediately identifies it as the Union. This colossal robot of destruction wreaks havoc. Fuko attempts to reach Andy, but she's stopped by someone who senses her likeness for undead. Fuko finds herself unable to move her legs, and she is stuck in a doggy-style position. The robot instructs the man to terminate the girl's life because the orders are to capture Undead and eliminate Unluck, but he engages in her ass. He engages in conversation instead. Andy seizes the opportunity for a surprise attack, but his body suddenly stops moving. Fuko attempts to explain that the guy behind her is the one stopping her from moving, but Andy notices that she's moving her hands freely. It's her legs that aren't moving, so they are clearly unrelated. Andy clarifies that both of these individuals are external targeting restraining type negators, which might make them appear similar. However, their abilities and ranges are distinct. RoboCop, with his suit, has paralyzed his body, and he assumes that the blue-haired guy is responsible for Fuko's doggy-style position. The issue is that Andy doesn't know precisely what they're negating to make this work. The guy with the thick neck is impressed that Andy has figured out this much. However, he points out that simply knowing that doesn't change anything, and Andy doesn't seem to care anyway. He takes a punch to test something. He discovers that he's correct because he can move perfectly well after being struck. He figures out that all he needs to do now is let himself get hit, repair himself, and then retaliate by punching the robot. The large robot calls him an idiot, and they continue exchanging punches. The blue-haired guy is impressed by Andy, acknowledging that he's enduring an immense amount of pain, but he can't help but comment on how unconventional Andy's fighting style is. Fuko is frustrated, wondering if they're going to be pursued by people like them forever, and the guy tells her that it's only if they can continue to escape. He mentions that the meteorite they used didn't do them any favors, as it increased their capture priority levels from 5 to 8 on a scale of 10. Now, no matter how many hunters they avoid, they will always be pursued by other threatening individuals. Fuko is shocked to hear that, and wonders why they aren't targeted like Andy and her. At that moment, the robot uses boosters to enhance its punch, knocking Andy's head off. The man with the thick neck is glad to see Fuko's curiosity piqued. He introduces himself as Shin, and the robot urges him to stop answering Fuko's questions. Shin believes she deserves to know, so he explains that there are 10 members in an organization known as the Union, which is dedicated to controlling unidentified phenomena. Once inside, negators are no longer pursued as long as they agree to carry out missions. To become members, they must pass specific tests. Fuko is excited at the prospect of safety if they join, but the robot threatens her, stating that all positions are currently occupied. As long as there are no vacancies, the team remains unchanged. Any negator who isn't a member is considered a UMA, posing a threat to the world. The robot prepares to eliminate Fuko, but Andy intervenes to protect her. Having heard everything, Andy decides that they will join the hunting party instead of being hunted. He's excited about this idea and plans to make room for themselves on the team by defeating the two pursuing them. It's unclear what missions they will be assigned once they join the team, but Andy reassures Fuko that he will do everything to protect her and never hand her over to anyone. Fuko starts blushing and her floodgates start to open, as there is something bumping his bum.
Seriously, what the f?
With that said, Fuko understands what needs to be done and touches Andy's
Oh shit, here we go again.
chest. She wanted to touch something else, but that makes the anime 18+, so it is fine. The bulky robot mentions that they've made direct contact, but Shin reassures him that it was only a small area, so the unluck won't be too severe. After distancing herself, Fuko explains that a massive stroke of unluck is coming. She clarifies that the size of the unluck doesn't mean she's in love with Andy. She simply likes him out of gratitude. The robot tries to tell Shin to go after the girl, but he doesn't respond to being given orders. Fuko continues to clarify her feelings while Andy prepares for the unlucky event. She says one more time that she's not falling in love with Andy. Just then, Truckland suddenly appears, and Andy tells the two pursuers that it's time for them to give up their seats on the team. An explosion occurs, but the evil duo survives, and Andy leads them on a chase. He explains that when facing external targeting negators like them, it's essential to quickly determine what they are negating. Andy demonstrates his intelligence by deducing that when the robot takes an attack stance, it negates his movements, which likely means its power is called unavoidable. However, Shin's abilities remain a mystery, as he managed to restrain Fuko without exhibiting any specific movements. He decides to stay hidden and employ some hide-and-run tactics to figure them out. Andy prepares for an attack, but is shocked to find that the building is filled with dynamite. The robot becomes frustrated with Fuko, stating that her unluck isn't a weapon but a disaster unless they can predict the outcome. He decides to destroy Andy first, but he's shocked to find that Undead is behind him. Andy tells him to take his hand since his body parts disappear in 30 seconds. Andy gets ready for his next attack by biting down on his own finger. He says his goodbyes to Robot and sends his fingertip right through the robot's brain. Andy calls this his parts bullet. He uses his regenerative power to shoot his body parts like projectiles. Unfortunately, the robot couldn't prevent Andy's ability to regenerate. Shin arrives, taken aback by the sight of the robot's destruction. Shin is impressed by Andy's fighting abilities. Andy informs him that he's next in line, but Shin explains to him that he has just secured his position on the team. Andy selflessly says that he has just secured a place for Fuko on the team, but he still needs one for himself. Shin prepares for battle, and Andy wonders what he negates. Andy decides to discover it by getting his life ended over and over again. Andy starts the fight by aiming for the gap in Shin's stance with his right leg, but he's surprised to discover that he actually attacked with his left leg instead. As Fuko arrives, she watches Andy and Shin engage in a battle. Shin can barely hold back his joy as he points out how amazing Andy is because he never believed anyone could actually reach him and expresses a desire to spar with him regularly. Fuko is surprised by their budding friendship. Andy believes that Shin is teasing him and asks Fuko to throw him his sword. Fuko tosses the sword to Andy, who concludes that Shin's power is about opposites. Shin deliberately exposes a weakness in his defenses and prepares a countermeasure on the opposing side. Right becomes left, up becomes down. It's quite frustrating, but Andy concludes that this is the essence of Shin's strategy. Andy manages to catch his sword using his neck, shortly after figuring out his opponent's tactics and moves in to conclude the fight. But somehow, he is stopped. Shin explained to him that it was only for a split second, but Andy hesitated on whether or not to cut him down. Shin is surprised since, despite Andy's nearly 200 years of life, he still hesitates when it comes to ending someone. It's either that, or he didn't want Little Miss Unlucky to witness him taking someone's life. Shin is ready to end the fight, but Fuko attempts to intervene with her unluck. However, Shin easily avoids her. Shin keeps his rule a secret, but he states that they won't be able to run away or touch him, as his power operates under their deep psyche. Andy scolds Fuko for jumping in, but she just wants to help. Shin asks which one of them should join the team, and Andy quickly chooses Fuko. He is ready to be taken to a lab for testing, but Fuko reminds him of the past and questions why he would willingly submit himself to such an ordeal once more. If he want, he can submit his him. He believes that she won't survive long in a lab and assures her not to worry, though, since he guarantees to slip out before she dies, even if she becomes an old ugly hag by then. He promises to win her heart and her pussy. Andy instructs both of them to depart, but Fuko asks them to hold on for a moment. Fuko tells Shin to look away, but he explains that he can't since it will undo his ability. She tells him that he has to and shocks everyone by saying she's going to do some banging with Andy. Andy reminds her that she has to fall in love with him first, but Fuko retorts that her body is messed up and she's never experienced romance. She's uncertain whether she has developed feelings for him, but he is someone who's willing to fight for her sake, even if it leaves him battered and bruised. This is why she can't simply leave him behind without sacrificing something that could provide him with the unluck he needs to put an end to his own suffering. In a dramatic fashion, she apologizes for her inability to do more to repay him, but this causes Shin to burst into uncontrollable laughter. Shin finds it amusing how close they've become in just one day. Their comedic dynamic is so strong that Shin believes separating the two of them would be a grave mistake. Shin is willing to make a deal. He'll have them kill another member of his team, and in return, he'll put a good word for both of them. In 3 days at Lake Baikal, a team member with a red necktie and an emblem will investigate a UMA. If they eliminate this member, Shin considers their deal sealed. Before he leaves, he cautions them that there will still be individuals pursuing them on their journey. He wishes for their safety and hopes they can reunite at a later time. Fuko is surprised by his mercy, and Andy explains it's all because of her deviant behavior. She assures him that she is serious about her offer, but Andy, a man of great integrity, states he doesn't want to handle things that way, considering it reckless. He instructs her never to attempt such a stunt again, and she agrees. Their next destination is Russia, but Fuko points out that she doesn't have a passport. That's okay, since Andy doesn't have pants, and he doesn't trust public transportation anyway. Andy is extremely hyped about visiting Russia, with its abundant grape juice. He's pleased to learn that Fuko is 18, the legal drinking age there, and promises that they will share a drink once their mission is completed. Then a look into the past takes us to 1970, where we see Andy in a Union isolation facility. In a separate room, there's a young girl with pink hair. They can see each other's ugly faces through the glass, and Andy uses his red sauce to wish the young girl a happy birthday. Back to the present, we witness a girl with pink hair in outer space, looking down on a boat. It becomes evident that she is the same young girl from the past. On the other side, Andy is satisfied with his upgraded ship and tells Fuko they'll reach Russia quickly. However, she's concerned because she mentioned that they'd be pursued aggressively throughout their journey. Andy tries to convince her to come out of hiding and have some fun, but her fears are realized as alarms go off, missiles rain down, and they are attacked by fighter jets. Andy simply wishes he had the opportunity to enjoy a drink. Fuko can't believe how composed he is at this moment, and he points out how terrible their attacker's aim is. He also suggests that they can rely on Fuko's unluck to get out of the situation. Fuko tries to explain that her unluck doesn't work that conveniently, but Andy insists it's all about how she uses it. His undead ability isn't just about preventing death. He cuts his arm to make it into a weapon, emphasizing that it's all about how he utilizes it. His part's bullet fist destroys their attacker, and Fuko foolishly wonders if that means they are now part of Union. Andy explains that all 10 members have a gold emblem on them. Off the top of his small and ugly head, he has 3 individuals in mind who likely bear the emblem. The first is the creator of the indestructible katana that he stole. This person is referred to as Unbreakable. The second person is an engineer-like individual who conducted experiments on him 50 years ago. The third is the individual who abducted him 50 years ago, a woman with the ability to create invisible barriers. Andy points out that being undead doesn't make him invincible and cautions that they would be in a dire situation if they ever confronted this girl. Fuko is surprised that there's someone our hero can't defeat and hopes they never encounter Barrier Girl. He tells Fuko that no matter who stands in their way, they'll do whatever it takes to reach the lake and complete their mission, even if it means relying on her unluck. Andy returns to the captain's seat as another fighter jet appears, and he informs Fuko that he will have to get a real good feel for the unluck rules of her misfortune before the situation becomes more dangerous. He wants to grab her milkers. He hints at getting more intimate with her to understand her unluck better, which makes her uncomfortable. She tells him that doing so won't improve his likability. Andy remains confident that everything will work out fine. In space, the girl attacking them appears to be the same girl from Andy's past. We see a crazy look on her face, and she states that he is the only man in this world she has been capable of loving. She launches a powerful attack knowing that he will be alright, and believes Andy will return to her. Back on Earth, their ship is destroyed, and Andy investigates the damage by the attack. He finds Fuko unconscious underwater, caught under the wreckage. Using his regenerative abilities, he frees her and gets her to the surface. Fuko wakes up, and Andy prepares to surrender to buy some time for an experiment. He believes there's a way to control her unluck. She reminds him that it can't be controlled because it's the root of all her problems, but he points out that she simply can't control it at will. Andy explains that her unluck previously affected nearby objects, but the lightning bolt and meteorite came from far away, because the haircut and the kiss are things that she has great personal value for. He reveals that he conducted an experiment involving something she values greatly, which will trigger a large stroke of unluck. Fuko has no idea what he did, but she notices that her clothing has been tampered with. Andy explains that he performed chest compression to save her life. She can't believe it, and hopes that's the extent of what he did. While he speaks, Fuko grows increasingly embarrassed, and the ocean starts to swell beneath her. Beneath them. Unfortunately, Andy clarified that she still wasn't waking up, and he reveals his experiment, explaining that he had to resort to mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Her unluck causes an oil tank in the ocean to explode. Once on a jet, Andy uses his special move, the Crimson Crescent Moon, to eliminate the pilot instantly. Andy explains that the attack is a combination of his regeneration ability and his speed. Fuko is worried about Andy's arm with sword firmly embedded in it. He uses his arm with a sword as a sheath for his attack. The jet begins to nosedive, but our hero, Andy, manages to regain control. Later on, our ugly Andy shares that his experiment has been a success. The experiment's idea is to find something unlucky, like the oil tank they used, and understand the right level of contact to trigger it. This will make Fuko's unluck a valuable asset in a fight rather than just accidents. Fuko seems to have a glimmer of hope but still can't fully accept this idea. She believes it might have been a fluke and expresses her concern that relying on her is not a good idea. Andy remains positive and excited about getting some Mountain Dew, which surprises Fuko because it shifts the trip's focus. At a later point, the jet activates its self-destruct sequence, forcing Andy to eject both of them. Even though it's clear that their theft has been discovered, Andy remains in good spirits. Despite falling from the sky, Andy's confidence shines through, as he has another technique from his mercenary days. He calls it a 5-point landing. Andy cushions her fall by first landing on the balls of his—
What do you mean by that?
the balls of his feet, then the sides of his calves, followed by his small butt and back. Fuko is disgusted by the sound of bones breaking, but in Andy's perspective, it was an absolute success, and he knows that in the future, he will insert his bone in her. Andy warns her to be cautious of her surroundings, as their target might be nearby. However, they both become completely captivated when Fuko catches sight of the stunning lake. Members of the organization will be at the lake to conduct investigations, which is logical since it's a suitable location for unidentified individuals to seek refuge. Fuko is awed by the view and confesses that she's always been a bit of a shut-in, likely because her touch can kill living things. This is her first time traveling overseas. So, Andy suggests that she take the opportunity to do some sightseeing and reassures her that they don't need to worry about the Union here, as they won't act with so many tourists around. Operating in secret is more their style. He then goes off to contact his old war buddies for backup. He temporarily leaves her, but reminds her that she's come to Russia. He encourages her not to miss out on the experience by sticking to her usual timid self, and urges her to enjoy her time there.
2 hours later.
Some Russian men approach her to ask her price for the night, but she quickly runs away. As she was walking around, she becomes captivated by an ugly girl and her artwork. The girl is impressed by Fuko's Japanese heritage and shows off her schoolgirl uniform inspired by Japanese schoolgirls. Fuko, who never attended high school, is unsure of how to respond. The enthusiastic girl seems disappointed by this revelation. Fuko admires the girl's art, which she recognizes as watercolor painting. She explains that she doesn't get out often and dabbles in art occasionally. Despite feeling that she's not very talented, the girl wants to be friends and encourages Fuko to paint with her. Fuko initially declines, mentioning that she's waiting for someone, and the girl speculates that she must be waiting for her boyfriend. As Fuko thinks about Andy, the girl eventually persuades her to join in. After some time, the girl calls Fuko Little Lucky and points out the word lucky is written on her hat. She asks Fuko whether she prefers things that change or remain the same. The girl expresses her preference for things that don't change, those not influenced or controlled by anyone. She loves art because it captures the ever-changing world as an unchanging drawing, much like what they are doing now. Fuko finds it difficult to choose and decides she needs some time to think. The girl is understanding and suggests they continue having fun together. Hours pass, and Fuko finally finishes her painting, but she's too shy to show it to her new friend. She hopes the girl won't laugh since she added many elements to the artwork, but the girl reassures her that art is all about freedom. Fuko shows her the painting, but the girl is left speechless when she sees it. She asks about the sparkling elements around the moon in the artwork. Fuko explains that there's nothing in space except for the moon and the sun, and feels the moon looks lonely up there, so she added some friends to it. The girl is touched by Fuko's thoughtfulness, and they agree on how lonely the night sky can be. Fuko then reveals that she has an answer to the girl's previous question. She explains that for a long time, she couldn't change, and life was so tough that she wanted to die. However, 4 days ago, she met a peculiar pervert guy, and things have been chaotic ever since, including explosions and ending up in Russia. What stands out is that this guy never once considered her 10 years of being a shut-in. Amid all the chaos, he somehow helped her change, which is why she could paint now. While painting with her new friend, Fuko had a great time and appreciates having someone who influences her in their change. At this moment, the girl's personality undergoes a noticeable shift. The girl is impressed by Fuko's beautiful words but points out that they seem quite naive. Fuko is puzzled as the girl is in the water, contemplating whether age might have finally caught up with her. It becomes evident that this girl possesses extraordinary abilities when Fuko is astonished to witness the lake floating. The girl stands atop the levitating lake and dons a suit, while Andy suddenly appears out of nowhere. Fuko seeks answers from Andy, but he remains silent and attacks the girl with his crimson crescent moon. The girl easily deflects the attack and expresses delight at the fact that Andy, whom she affectionately calls Daddy Dearest, hasn't changed at all. Andy playfully comments on the girl's excessive use of makeup and reveals her name as Gina. The girl doesn't look happy after being praised for her makeup. On the other hand, Andy makes another successful 5-point landing, but Fuko urges him to be serious. She questions whether Gina is the troublesome pink-haired she mentioned earlier, and Andy confirms that she's the one who captured him 50 years ago. Gina calls for her hat and informs her headquarters that she'll be spending time with her friends until the scan is completed. She utilizes her immensely powerful ability to create stairs and mentions that her boss briefed her. She is aware that they aim to kill her to gain entry into the organization. Nevertheless, she tells her friends, Daddy Dearest and Little Lucky, that it won't be so easy. Elsewhere, Shin thinks about the enjoyment he got from battling the undead. His student comes over to remind him to concentrate, and she informs him that Gina is about to engage in a fight with undead. Shin has become quite familiar with the duo and is confident that they will overcome any challenge they face. Back at the lake, Fuko mounts Andy, and Gina rushes toward her Daddy Dearest, as it has been a long time since they last saw each other. Andy removes his sword from his arm and tries to strike Gina with his blood. His attack won't be successful in cutting her, and Gina is surprised that after 40 years on their first reunion he wants to cut him. Fuko questions if Gina is the one who caught Andy 50 years ago, and Gina confirms that she not only captured him but also sucked and supervised him throughout his captivity. Fuko is surprised since they appear to be the same age, which flatters Gina. However, Andy points out that Gina was 16 when she sucked his dick. Caught him, which means now she is a 66-year-old hag. Andy is impressed by the organization's anti-aging technology, but Gina uses her ability to silence him. Gina mentions that she is 16 internally and forces Andy to cut his face off with her ability. Adding to Gina's already peculiar behavior, she tries to kiss his severed face, but it disappears. Andy realizes that something invisible is covering his mouth, so he must strategize on how to deal with it. Gina is becoming increasingly irritated by how close Little Lucky is to Andy, and reveals that she was the first to suck the
What do you mean by that?
She was the first fall in love with him. She then tells the story with wetness in her in eyes, the story of how they met. She was the hunter, and he was the target. When she caught him, all the positions were filled, so he sat in a cell, where she sucked. She eventually apologized for capturing him, but Andy was cool about it, and stated that he was defeated fairly and squarely. He mentioned that there were numerous ways for him to meet his end in his prison cell. He considered it an excellent environment for him to understand the principles of his undead ability. He assured her that they would have a rematch once he managed to escape. She held him in the highest regard, but he managed to escape 10 years later without uttering a single word to her. However, he disappeared for the next 40 years until he met Fuko. As Gina continues talking, Andy introduces her to some grenades. She remains unharmed and expresses her anger at Shin for beating her to meet undead. Gina remains entirely unscathed and clarifies that she desires to be the first one to encounter undead. However, she's angry that Shin beat her to it. Shin was supposed to notify her when he made contact with undead, but he turned out to be a combat-obsessed lunatic. She thanks Shin for bringing Void with him, as his death opened up a spot on the team for Andy. Andy tosses a flashbang and charges at Gina, but she maintains her barrier. Andy has to chop his leg to become a rocket so he can avoid a devastating attack, and Fuko wonders if they should flee. Andy is not thinking about running away, but he is focused on gathering information about Gina's ability. Fuko asks about Andy's war buddies, but he sadly explains they are all dead. Andy advises the anxious Fuko to calm down, assuring her that he will certainly determine what Gina's ability negates. Andy notes that Gina solidified the lake and telekinetically lifted it, indicating her ability to create invisible walls and stairs is her primary power. He believes this means she can harden any objects, and wonder if she can harden his
Seriously, what the f?
But it doesn't explain everything. Andy uses his finger bullet technique, but his fingers don't reach Gina, who uses her spinning hat to slice him in half. But Andy notices something about the large hat. Gina mentions that Andy could have dodged if he weren't so concerned about Fuko, and believes that their ongoing battle would be much fun if Fuko had died earlier, and she reveals that she was the one behind the space projectile attack on them. Andy, now restrained and unable to escape, realizes he won't get away from Gina anymore. Gina wants Andy to abandon helping Fuko. However, Andy interrupts her, stating that whether it's fate or not, Fuko is his. Fuko glows red, and Andy clarifies that he won't let her die until he breaks her back by putting his bone inside her. Gina, displaying even more madness than Andy, expresses her intention to claim his head as she did 50 years ago, making him hers forever. Andy prepares to make a move and informs the worried Fuko that he has figured out what Gina negates. He surprises everyone by shoving a grenade in his mouth and using his parts bullet attack on his head, launching it skyward. He instantly regenerates his whole body, only to explode it 1 second later. Both girls are in shock as they witness Andy blow up his own body, causing blood to rain down from the sky. Andy explains that Gina's power is the ability to negate an object's change in form, and all her invisible attacks have been negating the change in the air itself. Covered in blood, it is clear as a day. Fuko manages to catch Andy's severed head, and he reveals that Gina's ability is called Unchange. However, Gina points out that he can't do anything about it. Andy, though, explains that he's not alone and regenerates inside Fuko's shirt. Gina says that once they are caught by their hand, not even he can escape their grasp. Andy realizes that he can't reach Gina directly, but he believes they still have options. He instructs Fuko to spread out and cover as much surface area as possible. However, this decision angers Gina, who disapproves of Fuko's actions in public. She believes that Fuko has seduced his daddy Undead with her big melons, unable to understand why Andy keeps such a weak girl around. Gina spitefully comments that Fuko won't be able to maintain her melons and they eventually will hang, but it won't be a problem for her due to her unchangeability. Andy refutes Gina's claims and points out that she is an external targeter. There are two types of negators: self-targeters who can only use their powers on themselves, and external targeters who affect anyone other than themselves. Gina tries to say that she is a self-targeter and uses her youthful, unchanging appearance as proof. Andy has no chills and mentions that Gina uses piles of makeup to appear younger but can't conceal the sagging parts of her body. Andy makes it clear that her ability works on everything except living organisms. In anger, Gina slices off Andy's legs, but it doesn't hinder him as he can move using his blood. Andy provokes her further and realizes that her invisible arms require time to generate, with the real challenge being how to penetrate her invincible barrier of air. Fuko is surprised by how Andy has gained more advantageous position, and he have also extracted a lot of information about Gina, who appears to be upset but strangely approaches them with a walk rather than running. Andy expresses gratitude to his smart partner for helping him figure out how to reach Gina. They plan to trigger Fuko's unluck, but their flight is obstructed by an invisible obstacle. Gina explains that they are interfering with the organization's investigation, and beams begin firing from the sky. They're looking for UMA, and she's scanning the river for that. Gina has had enough and decides to conclude their battle. She reveals that the replacement for the UMA will be someone with a bit of luck. Gina then discloses the presence of a giant spacecraft that was there all along. She mentions Fuko's preference for change and reiterates that she hates change. Gina expresses her longing to return to the person she was 50 years ago and to be one with her loved forever. She is determined to remain in the organization so she can continue chasing him. Gina insists that she won't allow Andy to have the death he desires. Gina launches a fierce attack and inflicts significant damage. Andy agrees with her, emphasizing the appeal of being born and dying, the greatest forms of change. Andy removes his leg to utilize his unusual ability and clarifies that death will be his, not Fuko's. To further provoke Gina, he elaborates that he intends to ensure Fuko's survival. He plans to win her affection repeatedly until she falls deeply in love with him. Fuko will change her heart, then they will seal the deal by doing the thing, and that will change his mortality. Gina doubts Fuko's endurance in the organization, describing it as a painful and hollow ordeal. Andy narrowly dodges an attack and reveals a hole in the barrier beneath Gina's feet, which she uses to walk around. He plans to slip through in her hole.
What do you mean by that?
Slip through her barrier hole, and defeat her with the unluck he has been charging up this whole time. The most Andy can hope for is to insert his head into the hole, but even in that case, Gina would likely eject him. However, he has a plan, and they proceed to put it into action. Andy initiates the plan by launching his sword toward Gina. Then, he uses the force generated to cut his own hands, showering Gina with his red sauce. However, the hole is small, and they must lift it using Andy's sword. Fuko creates distance and propels Andy's head through the hole. Andy is aware that the unluck outside the barrier won't harm Gina, even if it summoned a meteorite. But the unluck inside will kill him. Since Gina's barrier consists of air, light can pass through it without any hindrance, just like when Andy used the flashbang. This implies that the unluck must be light-based. Additionally, he was in contact with Fuko for a long time, so it will be huge just like his dick. Subsequently, we see that the immense floating ship's weapon has been triggered, and it releases a formidable and deadly beam. The destruction caused by the powerful beam is immense, leading to the collapse of the floating body of water. Fuko rushes to find them after realizing that Gina's power has been released. Gina is severely injured, and Andy intends to end her. However, Gina has accepted her fate, and Andy chooses not to end her suffering, as she doesn't have much time left. Gina explains her desire for change and reflects on her life's mission to prevent change in the world. She captured and executed many people, but despite her actions, nothing changed, not the world, and certainly not herself. Gina believed that was her life's mission, but now thinks she was wrong. She acknowledges Fuko's painting as beautiful. It made her see things she never thought she could. But he had seen some things we cannot talk about. Gina's condition is getting worse, and she urges them to leave, as the anti-aging effects are wearing off, and she doesn't want to be seen in her hideous, ugly, old hag state. Hearing this, Andy says that his face already looks like shit. Now what can be worse than this? She assures them not to be concerned about their positions in the Union because they are practically guaranteed to be accepted. Andy, however, disregards her concerns and embraces Gina. She tells him to stop, feeling embarrassed about her appearance, but Andy calls her foolish girl and reassures her that a few wrinkles won't change her ugly look. If a normal person sees her in this condition, he might die by looking at her. But he is different as he is immortal. And last, they share an intimate moment, holding each other closer. What's up everyone? If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.